Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dobar dan, dame I gospodo. Moje ime je Ilijana Todorovic I VP sam za pravna pitanja u Srpsko-američkoj konferenciji liderstva. For all of those who may not be fluent in both English and Serbian, let me just mention that we will begin in Serbian and then switch to English. Danas je sa nama jedan jako specijalan gost kojeg je, moram da priznam, izuzetno teško najaviti. Prije svega, zato što je on jedan od najpoznatijih I najostvarenijih Srba koji žive na ovoj strani svijeta. Ako ste srpskog porijekla, a živite u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama, vjerovatno ste u nekom kontekstu već čuli njegovo ime. A za one koji nisu imali to zadovoljstvo da ga upoznaju, on je čovjek čiju je biografiju I postignuće gotovo nemoguće predstaviti u kratkim crtama. Tako da ću, izbjegavajući rizik da nešto važno ne napomenem, samo reći da je imao dugu I uspješnu karijeru u državnoj I federalnoj vladi Sjedinjenih Američkih Država, u biznisu, kao I u vojnoj službi I široj dijaspori. A o svemu tome će danas biti riječ. Čast mi je I zadovoljstvo da vam predstavim gospodina Branka Terzića. Gospodine Terziću, hvala vam što ste našli vremena da nam se danas pridružite I podijelite svoju nevjerovatnu životnu priču sa našim ljudima širom svijeta. Dozvolite mi da vam isto tako u svoje lično ime I ispred SALC-a čestitam prekjučerašnji rođendan I poželim vam sve najbolje I mnogaja ljeta. A I da vam poželim srećan dan očeva koji se danas obilježava u Americi.
Hvala Ilijana I pozdrav svima u starom kraju, kako zovemo ovdje, iz Beograda, iz Srbije, moji prijatelji I rođaci I poznavci tamo. Drago mi je da sam ovdje I možemo da nastupimo sa razgovorom.
Hvala vam još jednom što ste s nama ovog nedeljnog popodneva. Okay, switching to English now. As our customary practice has been so far, I would like to turn it over to Aleksandar Đuričić, SALC's president, for his well-known introductory remarks. Alex? Oh, we may be having some technical difficulties here. Still.
Looks like we're. There we go. Go ahead, we hear you.
We hear you, you're good.
Looks like people, can everyone hear now?
Please comment on our post in case we are still experiencing.
I'm seeing no sound, so maybe. All right, well, I guess we can't hear me. Ilijana, I'm just going to throw it back to you. Oh, now they hear me, they say. Okay, so I'm going to restart that. I don't know if that's all right. I'll restart. I know Chica Branko, Mr. Terzic here, and Ilijana heard. I'm just going to do the English portion then. First, thank you all for joining SALC today as we interview the Honorable Branko Terzic, one of the most distinguished Serbian-Americans in U.S. history. I would also like to wish all the amazing Serbian fathers out there a happy Father's Day. I want to thank you, Mr. Terzic, our honorable, our distinguished guest. Happy Father's Day to you. As you will all hear today, there's much to be said about the life, success, and career of Mr. Terzic, and anything that I say in a couple minutes would not do him justice on those topics. However, I will mention a few things from my personal experience about Mr. Terzic, the person and the Serbian-American. I first met him and his spouse, Mrs. Judith Terzic, in person 2 years ago at the centennial celebration of the Serbian flag flying over the White House. As someone young and unfamiliar to him, I quite honestly, I expected someone of his stature to show little concern or interest in me. And I could not have been more wrong about that. Mr. and Mrs. Terzic opened their hearts to both my brother and myself when we were there. They treated both of us as if we were family, as if we had known each other forever, and that is the way he's been treated me since then. During that trip, he paid for my brother and myself, not knowing us. He paid for us to be able to sit with him at the gala dinner that evening. I remember, as someone who, my parents came from over there, they didn't know much about, these fancy dinners and fancy ways of being around, and how to act with these certain people. And I remember specifically, Mr. Terzic pulled out my lapel. I had it placed incorrectly, and he put it the proper way for me. And that was just the first of many times that he has done so much for me, and mentoring me and teaching me. And that just shows you the person that he is. And one of the most emotional moments for me was, when we started SALC in the first place, and we started doing these interviews, and we started putting things out there, and I felt some fear and nervousness. I think I remember one time I was very disappointed in something that I had done. I didn't, being a perfectionist, it wasn't exactly how I wanted it. And I received an email from Mr. Terzic, and in that email he said something that was very touching to me, and from that day has given me so much strength. He wrote, "Let me tell you, don't be disappointed. Keep moving forward." He said, "In the words of my father Dusan, samo napred sine." And those words, I think, in the context of being today Father's Day, is something very important and very important for our people and community to hear about Mr. Terzic, the person, not just the successful Serbian-American that has dedicated his life to civic service and public service, but Mr. Terzic, the Serbian-American. Mr. Terzic is a role model to all Serbian-Americans, not only for his professional success, his stature, and his poise, but for his character, heart, willingness to mentor, and understanding of the importance to give back to the Serbian community. Mr. Terzic, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for your unwavering support of SALC, and I apologize, everyone, for the technical issues in the beginning.
Apologies for me as well. It seems like technology may not be our friend today, but I think I was kicked out in the beginning, so I may have missed the beginning of your opening remark, Alex, so I apologize if I don't address something, but I know you always know how to animate and excite us. Mr. Terzic, I would like to start our Q&A session by mentioning some of the firsts that you as a Serbian immigrant managed to accomplish. And as we will soon hear, it is quite a long list. You were the first Serb-American who was on the board of the Republican Party in his state, was appointed by the governor and confirmed by the state Senate as a state official, that is, as the commissioner on the state of Wisconsin Public Service Commission. Was appointed by another governor and confirmed by the state Senate as the founding chairman of a new state agency at the time. the State of Wisconsin Racing Board. You're also the first Serb-American who served on 2 presidential advisory boards, the National Petroleum Council and the National Coal Council. You were the chairman, president, the CEO of a New York Stock Exchange-listed company called Yankee Energy System Incorporated. And if that were not enough, you were the first to chair a United Nations Economic Commission for Europe Committee in Geneva. Mr. Terzic, these are some of the positions and titles that you have had throughout your distinguished career. Let's begin by talking about your current endeavors. As our viewers can see on the screen, you're a distinguished fellow of the Competitiveness Council. What other positions do you presently hold?
Well, I'm a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. I'm on the faculty of the Washington campus, which is a wonderful program of 15 university business colleges where their MBA students come to Washington. Of course, I'm a senior advisor at the Women's Council on Energy and Environment, where I have many dear friends and where my daughter was a member at one time. I'm still the Royal Adjutant to Crown Prince Alexander, member of the Privy Council, and I serve on some, I'm a founder of the Society of Depreciation Professionals, and I'm a regular faculty member there. There may be a few other things too, but it keeps me busy.
I'm sure it does, and if that was not impressive, I'm not sure what is. Now, we've introduced you as the Honorable Branko Terzic. Could you please explain to our viewers the origin of the honorific, the Honorable?
Well, according to the State Department's protocol book, that is honorific given to presidential appointees confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And that's about 200 positions. So it's not that rare. It's the ambassadors, the federal commissioners, the secretaries and subsecretaries who are appointed by the president and require Senate confirmation. And of course, elected officials when they're serving in office and after office, congressmen, senators are also referred to as the Honorable.
Well, we are honored to be able to say that one of our own was among those presidential appointees. I mentioned in the introduction that you tapped into and made a mark across various industries. Let's explore that a bit more. For starters, how did your careers in state and federal government come about?
Yeah, the state and federal government careers were all the result of a combination of political activity and of being known in my industry. I was the only Serbian immigrant who was appointed a federal commissioner twice by President Bush, and that history there is a little bit. It's not that complicated. When I was a college student, I was in the Young College Republicans. I chaired the Republican Party club at the University of Wisconsin. Back then, Wisconsin was the most important primary in the United States. We had the Iowa caucus, which was not a primary, New Hampshire, which was at that time a totally white Republican state, and then Wisconsin, which was a state that had both Democrats and Republicans. It frequently had a Republican governor and 2 Democrat senators, or 2 Republican senators and 1 Democrat governor. And the notion was, if you win Wisconsin, you'll win the rest. It was very representative of the country. So a lot of money and time was spent in Wisconsin. Both political parties heavily campaigned there, and many of the heavyweight political operatives were sent to Wisconsin. I was recruited to be in the Nixon campaign, having been the co-chairman of the Republican Party. Later, I worked in the Senate campaign. When I left university, I continued my activity in the Republican Party as chairman of the 5th Congressional District Republican Organization. That put me on the executive board of the Republican Party. It made me a delegate to the National Convention, and all of that was a party activity. It's one of the 3 ways I want to encourage the members of SALC to get involved in politics. Number 1, be a candidate. I was a candidate as a 29-year-old state Senate candidate. I lost by a lot, but I was a candidate. Of course, I was a party official, and you can become active in the parties, either Democrat, Republican, or other party if you like. And the 3rd way is to get involved with the candidate, support a candidate, get to know the candidate well enough so you have their cell phone number. And when the candidate's in office, you can call and express your interest in particular topics. So you don't have to be a candidate, you don't have to be in the party, but somewhere along the line, all of you young professionals should consider getting involved. Otherwise, you're deferring very important decisions to others.
Thank you, Mr. Terzic, for all of those interested in becoming a government official in this country. We were just provided an excellent roadmap. Okay, moving on. What about the business aspect of your career? What has been your trajectory there? How did you become the CEO of a company listed on the New York Stock Exchange, the largest equities-based exchange in the world?
Yes, well, started off with an engineering degree. I got a summer job with a consulting firm, and I liked consulting. I liked the fact that the guys went for, at that time, what they used to call a 3-martini lunch. But I also liked working on short projects. I would be on a 5-year project. My attention span is much too short, and so I like short consulting projects. I enjoyed the mystery of it. You know, you get a consulting project; it's a mystery to be solved, a solution to be provided. That's why I like mystery stories and mystery novels. But I like consulting as being part of that mystery. And I looked around. I looked at role models. I had mentors. You know, if I wrote my autobiography, I think I'd have to call it The Kindness of Strangers, because all through my political career, my business career, I had somebody who I didn't know, who didn't owe me anything, take an objective look at me and say, I like this young person, I'm going to support them, I'm going to help them. And I've tried to do that myself in my career. I don't know you, I don't know who you are, but you seem like a good person, you're working hard. If I can share information, knowledge, techniques, why wouldn't I do so? So I had mentors. I had mentors in politics, the late Vincent Mercurio. I had mentors at work. Everyone from John D. Russell, who hired me as a summer student to work in consulting, to later mentors, Governor Lee Dreyfus, who put me as Public Service Commissioner, Governor Tommy Thompson, who had me chair the commission. Dreyfus had a funny quote. He said, anytime he makes an appointment, he ends up with 9 people mad at him and 1 ingrate. So, you know, you might want to consider that. So I've had mentors. The other thing I did was one can't create one's opportunities, but you can gather the credentials to take advantage of an opportunity. If an opportunity comes along that you like and you don't have the credentials, it's not an opportunity for you. So you have to look ahead and say, okay, what credentials would I need if that opportunity came along? And for a young person, time is on your side. For me, it's not. But when you're 29, 30, 25, 35, time is on your side, and you can spend the time to gain the credentials. So that is my advice. For example, I discovered as a young graduate in consulting that the clients preferred that the consultants had some experience in the company they were consulting with. So I left consulting and I went to work in a utility because my clients were utilities. And then when I returned to consulting, I had that extra credential of working in consulting. Later, I determined that in my field, clients really valued if the consultant had experience in regulation. So I became a regulator. And one thing led to the other. The CEO position came up in an unusual way. It was a newly formed company. They had no history, so they had no long succession plan. They needed a nationally recognized person to give them a brand name, and I was able to do that. I even had Martha Stewart come on board. She was, I got on the front page of the Wall Street Journal with Martha Stewart as my on the front cover of our annual report. So, you know, I knew how to do a little bit of public relations and what we needed to become a nationally known company, even though we were a small Connecticut utility and a holding company.
Well, that definitely sounds like that was a uniquely exciting experience. And I have to say that we here at SALC are the living proof that you indeed are giving back, and your advice has been proven to be invaluable time and time again. Now, speaking of unique experiences, you also served in the military. How and when did that happen? If I remember correctly, you even managed to reach the rank of a captain. Is that right?
Yes, I was. I went into I received. My generation was subject to the draft, And so after they suspended deferments for college students, at one time you could defer. The national policy, I think, correctly said, look, it's not fair that college students get a deferment and working people of the same age don't. So we're abolishing deferments. We're going to go to a lottery. I was in my last year. My lottery number came up. It was a very low number, so I knew I would be drafted, which wouldn't give me a choice of where I would go. And we had a local National Guard artillery unit in Wisconsin. I went to the unit the same year that George W. Bush went, and it wasn't that hard to get in. People criticized Bush for pulling strings to get into the National Guard. I got in the same year, and my father wasn't a U.S. Senator, and he wasn't a Vice President of the United States, I can assure you. So I got in the same year. I went through the training, basic training and other training, and then I applied to be an officer and went to the state of Wisconsin Military Academy, was commissioned an officer, went to officer training. I also uniquely was one of the first reserve officers to be offered to be a foreign area officer, which is an officer whose secondary specialty is a geography, a country or a place. My specialty, of course, was Yugoslavia, communist Yugoslavia at that time. There was a series of language tests and some other tests. And I was assigned to as a foreign area officer for the Balkans, and that was kind of a first as well. But mostly I was in the national. I commanded a firing battery of 155 millimeter howitzers. They looked like tanks. And then my last command was I was a captain. I commanded the headquarters battery of a brigade, which I would tell you is very much like being the maitre d' of a large hotel. You've got to find rooms and find drivers and find vehicles for majors and colonels and generals and others. We had a very fine general who I reported to. So I did about 17 years over a 20-year period. As an officer, you are subject to call-up. I did volunteer for Vietnam, but at the time the war was heading down and only career officers were going. And then between 1970 and 1990, we didn't have any wars as such. A minor Grenada, something minor in Panama. It wasn't until the year that I left the military, 1990, when I was a federal commissioner, that Iraq War came. And even there, they didn't want me, so they wanted me as a federal commissioner, and then my time expired. So I enjoyed it very much. I served. We did a lot of state emergencies, floods, police strike, fire strike, and tried to be of service.
Well, our people are historically known to be amazing and dedicated soldiers. So we thank you for representing us so well in that sphere too, and thank you for your service. But all of those who know you are aware that your service to the people has continued, although through different channels. I'm talking about your role in the Serbian royal family. We all had a pleasure to watch you interview His Royal Highness Crown Prince Aleksandar Karadordević in an earlier SALC broadcast. You indicated that you two are kumovi. Many in the diaspora and some in Serbia and Bosnia know you in your royal functions. How did you become the Royal Adjutant and a member of the Privy Council?
Yes, well, I'd met neither Crown Prince Alexander nor I can remember when we first met. We were teenagers or in our early 20s. In any event, I was in contact with him when he was a young officer and I was a reserve officer. And in 1977, he moved to Chicago, which was near Milwaukee. I had helped him find a job in the casualty insurance business, being an officer evaluating the risk of international shipping and the risk of airlines. So he did airlines and shipping and other kinds of casualty risk. He had been among other duties, he had been an intelligence officer as well as I had. So he had that risk analysis capability, worked for one of the major firms, was living in Chicago. I was a bachelor. And the princess at the time would try and set me up with various either relatives or people. But I met my wife, Judy, and asked the prince if he would be our, so the prince came, people knew he was there. He was getting invitations to various events, conferences, church events, celebrations, and needed somebody who could handle both Serbian and English, who could travel with him. We paid our own way. We didn't take a dime from anybody. He made that explicit in a couple of interviews that he did. And so I would travel with him as a secretary driver, bodyguard, gopher, whatever he needed as we went around the country. We went from California to Toronto, visiting in Serbian communities, and as he reestablished contact with the Serbian people. One thing about the prince, he could have just become an international playboy, but his dedication to family life, his dedication to the Serbian people was from the age of 20 when we first met. And so he's had an exemplary life that way, and I give him credit for that. And I've been with him since 1977. I was Royal Adjutant. 1978, Judy Antonić, my wife, became Judy Terzic. We're married. The Crown Prince accepted to be our cum, and later was the godfather of my son, Alexander Dusan, my daughter, Elizabeth Oliveira, and my younger son, Branko Terzic. So we're very pleased with that, and we've kept very close family relationship, as well as I still join him as the Royal Adjutant when I can.
That is a very interesting story, and we know that the royal family is very active with their humanitarian aid projects. It's both humbling and gratifying to be witness to all great things that you do for our people, and we thank you for that. I have to go back to your rich and inspiring biography. Your CV lists hundreds of articles and speeches, as well as many TV interviews on CNN, Fox, and other networks over a span of almost 50 years of your illustrious career. Are you still writing, doing TV interviews, and giving speeches? Is that something that you still enjoy doing?
Yes, I do. And I also lecture and teach, which I enjoy very much. I mentioned the Washington campus. We also have a Society for Depreciation, which is a specific kind of consulting we do. And I'm a founder there, and I lecture and teach for them. I also lecture for a couple of trade associations, which I enjoy, and at local universities, at Georgetown and at Johns Hopkins University as well. I enjoy writing. I used to write a weekly column for about 10 years called Terzic on Strategy for a New Power Executive. I did that for a 10-year period. I've also written for Public Utility Fortnightly, quite a number of our trade press. I still write. I had a column article this summer. I'm in the current issue of Horizons, which is a publication of the Center for International Relations and Sustainable Development out of Belgrade. I have an article in there about post-COVID, and I'm working on a book and a couple of other articles. One of the highlights of my publication was to be able to publish with such important people as Jimmy Carter, Henry Kissinger, and George Shultz. In 2007, my essay on energy was included in a compendium of essays by famous people, including Dick Lugar, Sam Nunn, and some Europeans. The book was called The World Crisis. I have it here, and I'm on the cover there. So that got me some publicity in Serbia as well, where they wondered who is the Serbian-American fellow that's in such distinguished company. And the answer is no, we did not all get together and talk about the book. So I did not sit down with Jimmy Carter, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and Lord Howe to discuss this. Although I did know Henry Kissinger back in the 70s. Somewhere there's a picture of the two of us. And
yeah,
a few years ago, I had breakfast with him with a mutual friend who was his assistant, and I mentioned that he and I had met in Milwaukee in '77, and he perked up and said, "Oh yes," he says, "I went to the All-Star baseball game that night," and our host was a good friend of mine, Senator Robert Kasten then, and so it's funny that he remembered. He didn't remember meeting me, but he did remember being in Milwaukee at that time, so that was quite nice.
And I have to say, as someone who reads and who admires your work, I will pray that you do not stop writing anytime soon. Like I and many others, I'm sure, have mentioned to you before, the Serbian-American community and wider society would greatly benefit from another book authored by you. And I truly hope that that's in the stars. That's in the stars for that to happen. Now, Mr. Terzic, I know for a fact that one of the most frequent questions that you get from young professionals is, how can I do what you did? I myself may have asked you that at some point in time. What is your answer to that question?
Well, every one of us is going to have their own path. Once again, my advice has been to always continually assess yourself. What are your skills? What are your talents? Are you happy? Are you being well utilized? Look at where you want to be and then get the credentials to go there. And you have to be honest in that assessment. Use your network, develop a network, reach out to people, get off your duff, get active, join the various professional. Too many of our people don't join the professional associations. They're not as well known in their professions as they should be. They don't take leadership positions in the professions. Why shouldn't you be the president of your local bar, the president of the local society of accountants, the president of the local whatever group you're in? Why shouldn't you participate with the Rotary and the service clubs? Why shouldn't you be important in your alumni association? Why shouldn't you support the arts and be on the board if you like poetry, the poetry board, if you like music and the opera, the ballet? All of these round you out, you meet people, you make connections, you add value to the community. And, de Tocqueville mentioned in his analysis in the early 1800s of American society that Americans were unique people who loved to join things. We like to join things and we like to create associations and fraternities and societies. And he thought this was part of the greatness of the country. Well, it is the greatness of the country, and those who emigrate here and don't move here should be aware of it. You didn't grow up with your father going to the Rotary or being in the Lions Club or being the president of the CPA chapter, the American Society of Appraisers, whatever, and yet that is the model here. That's where you make your connections. That's where you develop your skills as a speaker. You develop your skills as a negotiator. You develop your skills in managing and running a meeting. All of these are important skills, and it doesn't matter whether you're a chemist, a chocolate maker, or a parish priest. Meeting skills and negotiating skills and conversational skills are all important and will all help you in whatever your career decision is.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I cannot stress enough the importance of your message and the quintessential timing of it and of this interview. At the time when our people are facing some what I would call generational issues, the activism and togetherness of our community, especially young individuals, may just do the trick to tip the scale in our favor. And I hope that the response you just gave helps us get to that point. Now, to further build on that answer that you just gave us, during our preparations for this broadcast, you mentioned to us here at SALC that you had a specific purpose in appearing for this interview. Could you please share with our viewers what you meant by that?
Yes, and I have a little bit already, and that is to encourage all the SALC members and anybody who's listening to this broadcast to get engaged in this civil society. It's not enough to just do business. Doing business with a bad government is not good business, and the only way government will understand how society should run is if people from all sectors go into the government. Either full-time, part-time, have relationships, help write the rules, help write the laws, and guide the country. Leaving it to a core of career professional politicians, even among the best ones, they just don't know. Your local congressman doesn't know what's best for the bakery industry. Your local congressman doesn't know what's best for the restaurant industry. Your local congressman doesn't know what's best so that you can sell your product and service from Milwaukee, Wisconsin to Europeans. You know what's best, and you have to go and make sure that the members of Congress and the administrative entities and the various regulatory departments, that they know what will facilitate business. I was once asked, what can government do to improve business? And my answer was, government needs to get out of the way. Let business do business under reasonable rules. we need government. Don't get me wrong. We need government to make sure that the laws are enforced, that the markets are enforced, that contracts are enforced. Without government enforcing contracts, there is no contract. Commerce would stop if business lost the ability to go to government and have the government enforce a contract. Anybody in business knows that, and of course everybody in law knows that as well. So there is an important role for government, but it must be educated by the business community, the social society, as we've seen now. The civil society has to be there. We all have to be active participants and members of it. And so I'm looking to our community, in my case, the second, third, fourth generation of Serbian-Americans whose immigrants came here not from Serbia, but from the Austro-Hungarian Empire, with their own traditions and their own pride in their Serbian ethnic heritage, to the modern recent immigrants who frankly grew up under communism and need to understand that much of what they learned and were taught was communist propaganda, and they should be opened and look into that, because I've talked to people who grew up in communist. I have cousins and others who grew up in communist Yugoslavia, and there was, as with any communist regime, a very orchestrated propaganda campaign where they changed history, they changed people's views, they tried to change the relationship of the family. And to the extent that there was a joke on one of the Serbian televisions where one of the comedians is saying, under communism, they tried to tell us that we as children should love Tito more than we love our own father, that he was more important for us. And this isn't my words. This is out of one of the recent television shows from modern Serbia. So people are becoming aware of that. But there's a lot of subtle things. For example, I have dear friends from Serbia who still talk about Deda Mraz. I'm sorry, Deda Mraz is a communist fiction. It's St. Nicholas, folks, or Santa Claus. It's not Grandpa Frost who's going to bring you gifts, or should be emulated, or that should be discarded. And I understand it's a sentimental thing with some people and they grew up with it, but it's a communist fiction, and we have to go on with it. We also have to be very careful with people rewriting history. There are many people now rewriting the history of Serbia, and we're not even aware of. I just picked up a pamphlet called The Battle of Kosovo, and in here it repeats the fiction that 5,000 Croatians of the Knights of Malta fought at the Battle of Kosovo. Now, that was in Wikipedia. I call the Knights of Malta in Rome. I have connections there. I have a decoration from them, and asked whether they have any history of this. And they said, well, in the first place, we didn't have 5,000 people in the Balkans. The Knights were counted in hundreds, not in thousands. He said we didn't. And secondly, there's no record of any Malta military unit fighting with the Serbs. Now, it'd be fine if they did. I wouldn't have anything against it. If they did, bravo, they came to our aid. They fought against Islam. Knights of Malta have a distinguished history, but they weren't there. I mean, there's no other history there. And I saw later that it was removed from Wikipedia, but it finds itself in this kind of literature. And I don't know who's doing this, but we have to be careful and understand that there are others who'd like to change our history, rewrite our history. I mean, Montenegro is a good example. The notion of a Montenegrin as an ethnic group is going to be difficult, because my ancestors in Lika were all Montenegrin refugees, Montenegrin settlers that came from Montenegro. We even named villages in Lika after our home villages in Montenegro. The same with the Montenegrin Serbs that went up to settle around Šumadija. Karadordević's father, the ancestor of our royal family, came from Montenegro. He was a Serb from Montenegro. So the notion that Montenegrins are different from the Serbs is some kind of modern fiction that parallels the notion that Bosniaks were not either Turks or Christian Serbs before they adopted Islam. It's fine. You can call yourself what you want, but you can't change your history, and we have to defend against that.
Absolutely. Again, to the first part of your response, very significant message. I hope that it will resonate with all Serbian Americans, especially young professionals. And you raised some very interesting points, and I'm sure that there are members of our community who, feel both ways, who may agree or may not agree with you. So I think you had just given us an idea, and I will write this down to maybe explore this further in one of the future broadcasts. So thank you so much for that. Now, we cannot conclude our conversation without noticing and drawing attention to your home office. I had the distinct pleasure of visiting you and your lovely wife, Ms. Judy, whom I moram da je pozdravim ovom prilikom, at your Virginia home. And I had a chance to see it firsthand. Not only is it impeccably decorated, but it displays a number of knighthoods among your many awards. And you just touched upon that briefly. Where do the knighthoods originate?
Yes, after Crown Prince Alexander and I established the office in 1977, there was a normal round of communications and correspondence with the heads of the other royal families, both royal families that were reigning, the British, the Swedish, Spanish, Monaco, and the Netherlands and the Scandinavian countries, but with the non-reigning families of Greece, Romania, Bulgaria. Crown Prince Alexander is related to almost all of these families. I'm not sure if there's one he's not related to. And therefore, there was a contact and what was called an exchange of decorations. He was recognized as being the heir to the king, and so the various other royal houses would extend their royal decorations to him, and they had their own staff, and so there was generally an exchange of multiple decorations for the reigning prince and his chief of staff, or the next prince, and so I was the beneficiary of these. So they were awards that came with the position, which I'm very thankful for, but they're not for any services provided. There is one exception, and that is from the Knights of Malta. The Crown Prince and I worked together to refute some false orders that had claimed to be descendants authorized by various Serbian monarchs and kings, and they were all basically bogus in their history. And Crown Prince Alexander just indicated that he would only recognize the historic Knights of Malta, the Roman Catholic, the British Venerable Knights, and the Protestant Johannritter order, the three orders that came out of the Knights of Malta after the Reformation and after the breakup of the Church of England. And so I do have those decorations as a commander that came for services offered. I'll tell you, though, the most significant, I think, of the many awards and decorations, and the one that touched me most, is one I have behind me here. It is the Champions Award. Here somewhere. There it is. It's the Champion Award from the Women's Council on Energy and Environment. And the reason this one touched me the most was I was nominated by women I had worked with, women who knew me in the society, or women that worked with me at the Federal Energy Commission or at Deloitte, and they were And that was tremendously thoughtful of them. I had mentored a few, helped some others, and my wife and I came to this one, and it just reminded me how difficult a role in business it's been in this last half of the 20th century. We're getting more closer to parity. When I was an engineering student, I think 4% of engineering students were women, and they were generally young women whose fathers had been engineers and who were the only child. Women just were not encouraged into the sciences, or were actively discouraged from going into the sciences, into law. Now, I think more than 50% of law students are women, more than 50% of engineering students are women, more in keeping with the numbers, with the demographics. And so we've opened it up at the entry levels. We're not exactly there at the upper levels, at the upper management levels. We're nowhere near 50%. This will hopefully change, but there's got to be a change in attitude among men. And the same applies to minorities as well. I've been a supporter of the American Association of Blacks in Energy, and whose current president had been my marketing manager at Yankee Gas. And so it's tough when the system is rigged against you. It's not impossible, but it is tough. And those of us who have some say on how the system runs, we can unrig it. We can fix the rigging, either by law, by practice, by custom, by culture, but all of that has to be. So of the many awards I've had, and I was elected to the Hall of Fame for the Efficiency Award, which I also appreciated for work I had done. This one, the 2008 Champion Award of the Women's Council, probably is the one that is closest to my heart and the one that touched me the most when I was given it.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And after each of our conversations, I can't help feeling that your knowledge and wisdom simply know no limits. We mentioned briefly the importance of activism and participation of our people in political processes, especially when it comes to the issues that most deeply impact our communities. Given that SALC has emerged as an organization whose goal, or at least one of them, is to achieve exactly that, can you tell us how is SALC doing, in your opinion? How do you value the efforts invested thus far, and what else should we focus on?
Well, I'm delighted that you and the leadership team have devoted your time to this. You've all got jobs, you've all got careers that you're looking after. You're all basically at the early parts of your career, and of course, you don't want to stumble there. You want to get that work done. That work takes priority. A few of you are also in the early stages of family building with a new spouse and maybe a little one on the way. This will take priority too. I'm looking back on my career. I was a state official. I was working full time. I was a National Guard officer, which required 2 weekends a month. And I spent some time working with Prince Alexander, traveling around with him. Something had to give. And I think in my case, what gave was my attention to my family. I probably did not, looking back, spend as much time with the family as I could have or should have. Fortunately, Judy stepped in and covered for me. She was both the mother and in some cases the father, enabling me to do this other stuff. She went in with the sports and was the sports mentor rather than me, because she was a better athlete than I was anyway. But that's another story. And was worked with my children on their aspirations and careers more than I did. And so something did give. I don't know how I would do things differently, but clearly I do understand that. On the other hand, it is a 24-hour day, and you can't just work, and you can't just play. And I think giving back to the society and enriching the society through your activity and SALC through your other activities is significant and important. We Serbian-Americans are slow to learn. We haven't copied our successful other co-religionists, the Greeks. We have not developed the institutions they've developed. We haven't established the practices they've established. So we don't have much of a legacy to build on. We're just late to the game. But it's not a game that you can't learn the rules, and you can't ask around and find out what's effective and what's not. And the first thing that's not effective is petitions. They're just a waste of time and effort. What's more effective is individual letters and individual contact with the people who are paid to represent you. Once we get over this notion that 5,000 signatures, including Donald Duck, Daffy Duck, and half a Disney characters, when you look at them, is meaningless, and that 4 or 5 well-constructed letters to a congressman and senator can have and should have more impact I think we'll be moving ahead. And so we have there's a lot to be done. SALC is starting off in the right direction. First, you're identifying among your own peers, people that have interest, talent, funds that are available to work with you. So you've got to develop your core peer group. And secondly, you've got to have some concrete, obtainable objectives, stretch objectives, not simple ones, let's meet, but real objectives that can have effect. And then thirdly, periodically, you got to sit down and measure how you're doing. If you don't measure how you're doing, you'll never know if what you're doing is right or effective. And I think that's been the thing that we've missed a long time. People have done stuff and then claimed it was successful without any measurement. Did the piece of legislation get acted upon or not? Did you raise the amount of money you're going to raise? Did you contact the number of people you said you were going to contact? If we don't have measurable benchmarks for how we're doing, we'll never know how we're doing, and you'll never know how you're doing. So I am, I'm urging the group to make sure that you have objectives, you stay on objectives, that you use your time wisely. When you call meetings, make sure they're necessary meetings, make sure there's an agenda, make sure there's an action item. If there's no action item on a meeting, then the question is, why do you need the meeting? If it's just a briefing, mail me the material. And I've written on this. I've done some career development, other writing on the Women's Council on Energy and Environment website. Some of it I've put on my LinkedIn blog. I have about 8,000 people that I've connected with on LinkedIn, some of whom read what I post and probably most who don't. But in any event, I have talked about the importance of only having meetings when you have a decision to make. Otherwise, if it's a briefing, just send me the material. I'll read it on my own. And so you're doing okay. You've started off strong. You've got to coalesce as a team. You probably have some expertise that you're missing, and you'll want to bring in some additional people with that expertise, people who are vetted, people who really want to participate, not just people who want their name on a stationery or just want a title. Titles are cheap. And when I rejoined Associated Utility Services, my mentor there, Joe Brennan, who fired me twice, by the way, when I rejoined him, I said, what kind of, after being a public service commissioner, he said, what kind of title can I have? He goes, what were you last time? I said, well, I was vice president. He said, they can have any kind of title you want. I said, oh, well, okay, I'll be group vice president. He said, that's fine. That doesn't cost me a dime. And then I said, well, what kind of car can I have? He goes, well, what kind of car did you have last time? I said, I had a Buick. He goes, what kind of car do you want? He said, you can have any kind of car you want. He said, as long as it's American. He was a paratrooper, 101st Airborne. I said, Joe, I think I'll get a Lincoln or a Cadillac. That's fine. He says, get either one. I said, well, they're pretty expensive. He says, yeah. I says, it doesn't matter, Branko. It comes right out of your compensation. So Joe was a little smarter than I thought he was, and I was a little dumber than I thought I was. So when he gave me a fancier car, he lowered my bonus, and it did come out of my compensation. But that was all right. I knew the rules, and we were able to work that out. I've got observations in my long career. We find out, like, I'm here in Washington, politicians get in trouble. Most politicians will get in trouble when they take the position of, if I'm important, why aren't I rich? And so they'll end up cutting corners, accepting gifts. The businessmen here in Washington, they have another problem. They say, well, if I'm rich, I must be smart in everything, right? So, and then we have celebrities who come into Washington, and their position is, well, if I'm famous, I must be important, and therefore what I have to say is important. So we live with this. We understand how it works, and I think those of you who who think about it, I've always said politicians take the position that you can fool some of the people some of the time, and that's good enough to get reelected. So these are some of the things that we notice when we're here for a while. But I do hope SALC continues. I do wish that you open the umbrella, make sure that you're an open, positive organization. I think that many of our people have much to do. We have many issues. We have issues in the Serbian Orthodox Church that have to be addressed, issues of education, issues of structure. We have legal issues within the church that need to be addressed that are not getting supported by the mother church, who just don't understand. I sat with one bishop. I attend an annual luncheon with all of the bishops and the patriarch, and I sat with one bishop who said, I heard, Branko, that Serbian-Americans, they want to join the Greek church, and that's the problem. And I thought, I've been here for 67 years, and I've never, ever heard a Serbian-American say they wanted to join a Greek church. That is, that the church, I've gone to Greek. I went to Greek church 4 years at university. I went to Greek church when I was stationed in the army. Wonderful people, wonderful church. But I've never heard anybody say that our church ought to move over there. I mean, it's a different culture, a different language. But this is, the sort of misinformation, the level of disinformation that gets there. So we Serbian Americans have to explain. We have our laws. We have our system. Yes, we want our church to has to be compliant in this country. The Canadian church has to be compliant in Canada. It's a different country, and therefore there's much work to be done all the way around. Our parishes are suffering now from lack of Sunday funds, and not everybody's remembering to write a check for the amount that they would have given on the Sunday had they have gone. There's no other source of funds for the church but the parishioners. And if you didn't go on Sunday, for God's sake, write them, send them the $20 or whatever you would have given, and help us out, because it's a national problem, and it's not going to be solved anyway, but out of the pockets of the parishioners. There's no great fund. There's no church fund. The churches are wholly dependent. And priests are wholly dependent on those of us who attend, those of us who want to attend, and that's a problem that we're dealing with in every parish, and I hope that the people listening here will kind of reconsider. Like, if you haven't been for a couple of months, could you send a little check and help them out? Whatever the local church is, believe me, they need it. We need it in order for these important institutions to change. And that's kind of my last point. Many of our direct ancestors, I'm talking our grandfathers, in your case, great-grandfathers, during World War II died because they refused to give up their Serbian Orthodox faith. They died at the hands of the Ustashi. They died at the hands during the genocide of the Serbs in the NDH, the Croatian Nazi state, and they refused to give up their religion at the point of a gun. Too many of their descendants have given it up because they'd rather go play basketball or go play ice hockey on a Sunday morning. This was so hard fought. The preservation of our church and religion was so hard fought under hundreds of years of Ottoman domination, occupation, under a brutal regime in Nazi Croatia, that for us to voluntarily leave it is sad. And understand, everybody has the freedom of choice, freedom of religion. Nobody should be forced to go to church, but we need to at least reach out to as many people as they can, let them know the church is available. It's not a place where you're going to learn folklore. It's not the place where you need to learn the Serbian language. We have, I've seen too many families will come at 1 o'clock and drop the children off at the church for Serbian language lessons or for folklore lessons, but won't come at 10 for the liturgy. 20 years from now, that child is not going to need a church. And probably won't do folk dancing, and whether they use the language or not will be secondary. But clearly, clearly we need to, the church needs to reach out, make itself available, and we need to support the church in that. Otherwise, it will wither, and with it, our culture in this country. We're Americans. We're not, we're not hyphenated Americans. We are Americans. I was an American Army officer. I was an American government official. I'm an American citizen. That's what I am. But I can still practice my Serbian Orthodox faith freely, and I plan to do so. And I can encourage others of the faith to want to either join the faith or were born into it to do the same. So that's kind of my final plea to step up, step forward, and both do your civic duty and maybe your religious duty as well. And with that, I thank you for all this time, and thank you for the attention and the honor you've given me.
I think it just became clear to a lot of my friends why I was so eagerly looking forward to this conversation. And you've shared a lot of very important messages. And as to the last, some of your last points, I have to say that I really have to thank you for that, because not many of our public officials here or famous Serbians are even willing to speak about those things publicly. So thank you for that. And I would just like to mention to the beginning of your answer about Ms. Judy. Ms. Judy definitely gives an impression of an remarkably strong woman who, by the way, has an excellent fashion sense. You two together were, and probably still are, one of the most fashionable couple in the DC area. And that is no small feat. So let's just be clear on that. Thank you also for your invaluable pieces of advice. SALC will certainly continue to work on bringing our people together and on raising awareness of those issues that are most deserving of our attention. Before I let you go to enjoy the rest of your Father's Day Sunday, Mr. Terzic, thank you for finding the time to participate in this fireside chat, and thank you for everything that you have done and that you continue to do for our people and for the betterment of their position in this country. It was my particular pleasure and honor to introduce you to the few of those who may not know you, as well as to bring your inspiring life story closer to those who have had a chance to meet you. You are the living role model and an exceptional mentor to so many people whose pieces of advice changed and touched so many lives, including my own. And I can't thank you enough for that. I'd also like to extend my gratitude to all of those who were with us today and who are following and supporting SALC's work. Please stay tuned for more programs that we are in the process of preparing. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to email them to us, to our email address, info@serbianleaders.com. Thank you all. Have a great day. And please do continue to follow the COVID-19 protocols and guidelines to stay safe. Srećan pozdrav.
Thank you.